The galaxy was vast, a swirling collection of stars, planets, and civilizations all interwoven into a delicate balance. But within that balance, a new threat had emerged, silent, insidious, and invisible to all but the most perceptive eyes. The Varloth. For decades, their influence had been creeping through the underbelly of the galaxy, pulling strings in the shadows, while the rest of the galaxy remained oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. Captain Lenora Hayes stared out the viewport of the stealth cruiser Arbiter, watching the distant stars blur into streaks of light. Her fingers tightened around the armrests of her seat as the ship slowly moved through the neutral zone, a region where no faction dared claim territory, a place of safe passage for traders and diplomats. But safe it was not anymore. The galaxy's peace was a fragile thing, and something was stirring in the dark corners of space. "Captain, we've intercepted a signal," came the voice of Alien Core, the ship's communications officer. Lenora snapped her attention away from the stars and turned toward him. His eyes were focused on the console, but his tone held a sharp edge. "Unusual?" Lenora asked, her voice low. "Definitely," Alien replied. "The frequency is coded in a way I've never seen before, and it's coming from a human colony on the edge of Varloth space." Lenora's pulse quickened. Humanity had been isolated for years, a silent protector of the galaxy in its own right, but always operating under the radar. The Silent Guardians, an organization formed to defend humanity's interests in the shadows, had a presence in nearly every corner of the galaxy. They were Earth's best-kept secret, and Lenora was one of its leaders. To have a message from a human colony so close to the Varloth's expanding reach was more than just a coincidence. It was a warning. "Can we decrypt it?" Lenora asked. "I'll try, but it'll take a few minutes. The encryption is tight." The tension in the room thickened as the crew of the Arbiter waited in silence. The Varloth were not a direct threat to Earth, at least not yet, but they were masters of manipulation, skilled in diplomacy and subterfuge. Their goal had always been to destabilize galactic peace, to foster division and mistrust among the various factions. If they were involved with a human colony, it could mean a catastrophic shift in the balance of power. As Alien worked furiously at the console, Lenora's mind raced. What could this signal mean? Were there humans sympathetic to the Varloth cause? Or was it a desperate cry for help from a colony under their thumb? Either way, she knew that they couldn't ignore it. Earth's safety, and perhaps the entire galaxy's, depended on what they discovered. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alien's voice broke the silence. "I've got it," he said, a note of urgency in his voice. "It's a distress signal, coded in standard military language. They're under attack. The colony, Galen's Reach, is being overrun." Lenora's heart sank. Galen's Reach was one of the furthest human settlements on the edge of Varloth space, a strategic outpost that Earth had placed on high alert. But it wasn't just the colony's location that worried her, it was the implication of the attack. The Varloth had never directly engaged with human colonies. They were too cautious, preferring subtlety and manipulation. "What's the status of the colony?" Lenora asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension. Alien paused, then spoke. "The message is fragmented, but it mentions the Varloth, and something worse, an alliance, it says. A dark alliance." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The Varloth had made their move, and it was worse than anyone had feared. Lenora's thoughts snapped into focus. "We're going in," she said, her voice hard with resolve. "Prepare for immediate departure. We can't let the Varloth destabilize any more colonies." The Arbiter hummed as the engines powered up, and the crew sprang into action. Lenora stood, pacing toward the command center, her mind working through the strategy they would need to take. The colony under siege was one thing, but the mention of an alliance with the Varloth meant something far darker was at play. As the ship left the neutral zone and jumped to FTL speed, Lenora gazed at the stars again, but this time they seemed far more distant. The galaxy was no longer the peaceful expanse it had been just days ago. The shadows were stirring, and humanity's silent guardians were the only ones who could protect it. The Arbiter emerged from its FTL jump with a burst of energy, the familiar hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the floor as Lenora Hayes stood at the command deck. Her hands were clasped behind her back, and her expression was resolute. Before them lay the wreckage of what had once been a thriving human colony, Galen's Reach. The once bustling spaceport was now eerily silent, the asteroid belt surrounding it pockmarked with debris. Lenora's heart clenched as she scanned the readings. No life signs, she muttered. Her mind raced. If the colony had been destroyed, there was nothing they could do for the survivors. But the distress signal had been clear, there had been a battle, and the survivors needed help. "Captain, we're picking up energy signatures." Alien Core's voice broke through the tension, his fingers flying across the console. "They're coming from the colony's main power core. It's still online, barely." Lenora nodded, her voice sharp with authority. "Set a course for the power core. Prepare for a ground assault. Alien, I want those shields up as we approach. We don't know what we're walking into." "Understood," Alien replied, already inputting commands. The Arbiter slid past the outer perimeter of the colony's orbital defenses, the sleek ship cutting through space like a shadow. The massive asteroid that had once served as the colony's base loomed ahead, its surface scarred by explosions. As they descended toward the core, Lenora's mind ran through every possible scenario. If the Varloth had taken control, there could be anything waiting for them below, and the mention of a dark alliance on the distress signal still echoed in her mind. Could someone from within the colony have sold them out? The ground team assembled in the transport bay. Lenora, Alien, an ex-soldier named Garrick Tan, and their tactical medic, Dr. Maya Kale. They would go in first, assess the situation, and secure any survivors. The rest of the crew would hold position in orbit, ready to extract them at a moment's notice. The landing was smooth, too smooth. They hit the surface of Galen's Reach without incident, the transport ship's thrusters kicking up debris from the ruined colony. Lenora's boots hit the cold, cracked floor of a once bustling marketplace, now reduced to a ghost town. Broken stalls, discarded tech, and signs of battle were everywhere. The air smelled of scorched metal, the remnants of fires long gone. "Stay sharp," Lenora ordered, her voice low and steady as she scanned the surroundings. Garrick moved ahead, his heavy boots crunching over the debris. Maya followed close behind, her medical pack ready in case they found any wounded. Alien was at the rear, his eyes darting from every corner, his hands constantly adjusting his wrist comm. They moved through the ruins, every footstep a potential trap. The colony's once proud structures were now nothing more than hollowed-out shells. As they neared the power core, the telltale hum of the generator grew louder. They were close. "Something's not right," Garrick muttered, stopping suddenly. Lenora felt it too. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The sudden blast of gunfire shattered the silence. Lenora reacted instinctively, diving behind the cover of a nearby structure. The team was scattered, pinned down by a hidden enemy. Her pulse raced as she quickly scanned for the source. "Varloth," Garrick grunted, his voice filled with recognition. "Their soldiers are here." "Take them out now," Lenora barked. The team moved swiftly, Alien hacking into a nearby terminal to disable security systems, while Garrick and Maya covered Lenora as she advanced. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunfire, but Lenora's mind was clear. They had no time to waste. If the Varloth were here, then the situation was far worse than they had thought. The firefight was swift but brutal. Varloth soldiers, enhanced by cybernetic implants and advanced weapons, were formidable opponents. Garrick's experience in combat shone through as he picked off enemies with deadly precision, while Maya moved to tend to any wounded. But Lenora had no intention of simply surviving this encounter. She moved with purpose, her mind calculating every move. As the last Varlith soldier fell, she stood tall, her gaze fixed on the power core in the distance. The battle had been a mere distraction. "What's the status of the core?" she asked, her voice steady. Alien tapped into the colony's mainframe, his brow furrowed. "The power core is operational, but it's not just the Varlith here. There's something else, something human. Whoever's behind this alliance, they've set up a trap. A big one." Lenora's stomach twisted. The mention of an alliance was no longer an abstract concern. It was real, and it was right in front of her. The team advanced toward the core, prepared for whatever lay ahead. But one thing was certain: they had only scratched the surface of the enemy's plan. The real battle had just begun. As Lenora and her team approached the colony's central power core, the atmosphere grew even more tense. The sudden shift in the nature of the attack, the hint at a human hand in the destruction, gnawed at her thoughts. Humanity was not supposed to be a part of this conflict. They were protectors, guardians, keeping to the shadows while the galaxy danced on the edge of war. Whoever was behind this had crossed a line. The power core was housed in a massive chamber, its walls lined with thick cables and pulsing energy conduits. It stood at the heart of Galen's reach, a symbol of humanity's technological advancement. But now it felt more like a ticking time bomb. Lenora moved swiftly, her boots echoing in the cold, sterile silence of the chamber. Her crew followed, weapons drawn, alert to every noise. The hum of the power core was steady, almost soothing, but Lenora could feel the weight of something sinister pressing down on them. "Captain," Alien's voice came through the comms, his voice tight. "I've located something. A hidden terminal. It's encrypted." "Can you access it?" Lenora asked, her eyes darting around the room. The space was vast, with shadows creeping into every corner. "I'll try," Alien replied, his fingers flying across the controls on his wrist comm. A few tense moments passed before he spoke again. "Got it. I'm opening the file now." The terminal whirred to life, and the screens around them flickered. Images began to appear, encrypted data, maps, and then a face. Lenora froze. It was a man she recognized, a former ally, Commander Nathan Hale, a decorated officer in the Earth Defense Fleet, one of the most trusted leaders within the Silent Guardians. But now his face appeared on the screen, corrupted with static. His expression was cold, distant. "Captain Hayes," Hale's voice crackled through the speakers. "If you're seeing this, then it's too late. The Alliance has already made its move. Galen's reach is just the beginning." Lenora's heart sank. This wasn't just a rogue faction, it was something far worse. Hale's words hit like a hammer. "The Varloth are just one piece of the puzzle," Hale continued. "We've joined forces with those who wish to reshape the galaxy. The galaxy's peace is an illusion, a weakness. We're going to burn it all down and rebuild it, our way." The screen flickered again, and the image of Hale vanished, replaced by a map of the galaxy. The planets, once neutral, were now marked in red, signaling targets. Lenora's blood ran cold as she realized the scope of the plot. The Alliance had infiltrated humanity's own ranks. Hale, once a paragon of virtue, had become a traitor, selling out the very ideals he had once sworn to protect. "Alien," Lenora said, her voice steady but filled with anger, "get that map to the Arbiter's systems. We need to know who else is involved." "Already on it," Alien replied, his fingers moving rapidly. "We need to warn the fleet," Garrick said, his voice low but urgent. "The Varloth are one thing, but if Hale is leading an insurgency from within, we're facing a war on two fronts." Lenora nodded, her eyes narrowing as she processed the information. They had been prepared for a fight with the Varloth, but this was an entirely new threat. Hale had betrayed them all, and with his betrayal came a deadly alliance. The stakes had just been raised. The sound of boots crunching over the debris outside the power core chamber snapped her out of her thoughts. The team tensed, weapons ready. "Move out," Lenora commanded, her voice sharp. "We're not alone. Alien, get that data to the ship. Garrick, Maya, cover the door." As they took positions, a low growl of engines rumbled in the distance. Another group of Varlith soldiers, or something worse, was closing in. Lenora's mind raced. They had to leave, but not empty-handed. The information they had uncovered was too valuable. "Go," Lenora barked, her eyes darting toward the exit. "We've got what we need. Let's move before they seal us in." They bolted for the exit, their boots echoing in the empty corridors of the colony. The sound of approaching enemy forces grew louder. Lenora's heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts running wild. They had discovered Hale's betrayal, but what else had the Alliance planned? And how many more were involved? The shadows of the galaxy had just become much darker. As they reached the Arbiter, the distant rumble of an explosion shook the ground beneath them. Lenora's gaze shot to the sky. It was just the beginning. The Arbiter was a beacon of refuge amidst the chaos, its sleek form cutting through the dark expanse of space as Lenora and her team boarded the ship, adrenaline still pumping through their veins. Their escape from Galen's reach had been a close call, too close. As the ramp closed behind them, the weight of the situation began to sink in. "Captain, we've got incoming transmissions from the fleet," Ilian reported, his voice tense. His fingers danced across his console, bringing up a series of encrypted messages. "They're asking for a full report." Lenora's gaze hardened. She had hoped for a moment to process everything they had uncovered, but the war had no such mercy. "Get the messages decrypted. We need to know what they're saying, Alien." He nodded, quickly inputting commands into the ship's communication system. As the messages decrypted, his face grew even more grave. "The fleet's been compromised. Hale's influence has spread farther than we thought. There's been a complete breakdown in trust. Some ships are still loyal, but others have already pledged themselves to the Alliance." Lenora's breath hitched as she processed this new information. Hale's betrayal had been the spark, but it had ignited a fire within the fleet itself. This was no longer just about protecting humanity from external threats. It was now a civil war within their own ranks. The Silent Guardians, once united in their mission to protect the galaxy from the shadows, were now torn apart by a force they hadn't even seen coming. "We need to act, and fast," Lenora said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. "Gather the crew in the briefing room. We have to make a plan." As they made their way to the ship's command center, Lenora couldn't help but think of all the soldiers, officers, and civilians who had placed their trust in Hale. He had been their hero, their symbol of honor. How many of them would now follow him down this dark path? In the briefing room, the team assembled around the holographic table, their faces grim. Alien brought up the decrypted fleet data, displaying a map of key fleet positions and their current allegiances. The lines between the loyalists and the traitors were drawn in sharp contrast. The loyalty of their allies hung in the balance, and with the Alliance's growing strength, every decision they made now could tip the scale. "We're being forced into a corner," Garrick spoke first, his voice low but full of resolve. "The traitors are rallying. If they take control of any more ships, the war will be over before it even begins." Maya, always calm under pressure, added, "But if we don't act soon, they'll have the resources to outgun us. Our only advantage right now is surprise. We need to find the weak points, strike fast, and hit them where it hurts." Lenora nodded, her eyes scanning the fleet map. "There's a convoy of loyalist ships stationed near the Korath outpost. If we can reinforce them, we might be able to prevent a full-scale defection of the fleet. But we'll have to move quickly, and we'll have to do it in complete secrecy." Alien tapped a few buttons on his console, pulling up a detailed view of the convoy's position. The Oberon and Tempest are there. They're our best hope for holding the line, but the Alliance is closing in fast. If we don't get there in time, we'll lose the entire sector. Lenora's jaw clenched. We can't afford to fail. Prepare the Arbiter for a stealth jump to Korath. We'll rendezvous with the convoy and reinforce them before the traitors know what hit them." The team moved quickly, each member falling into their role with practiced ease. Garrick moved to the armory to prep their weapons, Maya checked the medical supplies, and Alien began coordinating with the fleet to ensure the rendezvous went smoothly. As the Arbiter powered up for another jump, Lenora stood at the observation window, her mind heavy with the burden of their mission. The galaxy, once a place of endless possibilities, was now teetering on the brink of collapse. The Silent Guardians were no longer just defenders. They were the last line of hope in a galaxy that was being consumed by darkness. "Captain," Alien's voice broke her thoughts. "The jump is ready. We'll be in Korath space in 30 minutes. Lenora took one last look at the distant stars, the cold, endless void stretching before them. "Prepare for jump. Let's save the fleet, and let's stop Hale before it's too late." The Arbiter's engines roared to life as it slipped into the void, disappearing from sight. The galaxy's fate hung in the balance, and the Silent Guardians would stop at nothing to protect it. But the line between friend and foe was becoming dangerously blurred, and Lenora knew that this war, this shadow war, was far from over. The Arbiter tore through space at unimaginable speeds, the stars around them warping into streaks of light as they jumped through the void. Lenora stood at the helm, her fingers gripping the console as the crew worked in near silence. The quiet hum of the ship's engines and the occasional clatter of boots on the metal floor were the only sounds that filled the command center. Their destination, Korath Outpost, lay ahead. A strategically important station located on the outskirts of the system. It served as the perfect staging point for their next move. Lenora's thoughts were dark, clouded with the weight of the mission and the uncertainty of the galaxy's future. They had to reinforce the convoy, but the real question was, would they be able to stop Hale and the traitors before they tore the fleet apart? Alien's voice interrupted her musings. "Captain, we're approaching Korath space. The convoy's on the edge of sensor range. I'm patching through a secure line to the Oberon." Lenora nodded, her pulse quickening. The Oberon was a battle-hardened cruiser, one of the few ships left in the fleet with enough firepower to make a difference. If they couldn't secure the convoy, the traitors would use the convoy's resources to solidify their control, and the situation would become even more dire. "Patch it through," she ordered, stepping forward to the communications panel. The image of Captain Edris Calloway, a seasoned officer she had once trusted as a fellow Silent Guardian, flickered onto the screen. His face was drawn and weary, the heavy weight of responsibility clear in his eyes. He spoke first, his voice tinged with frustration. "Captain Hayes," he began, "we've been fighting off skirmishes for hours. The traitors aren't just targeting our ships, they are targeting our morale. We've lost contact with several units, and some of the crew are beginning to question where our loyalty lies." Lenora could feel the tension crackling through the comms. "I know, Calloway, we're coming in hot. We'll reinforce you as best as we can. Hold the line just a little longer." Calloway's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, Lenora saw the doubt in his expression. "If the fleet splits any further, we won't be able to stop them. Hale's influence is spreading like wildfire. We need to act now." "I understand," Lenora said, her voice steely with determination. "Get your fleet ready for a coordinated strike. We'll engage the traitors head-on, but we need to know the numbers we're up against." "Understood. We'll coordinate as soon as you arrive," Calloway replied before cutting the transmission. As the screen went dark, Lenora turned to Alien. "Do we have any intel on the enemy's exact position?" "We've got some rough estimates," Alien answered, his fingers flying over the controls. "The traitor fleet is spread thin across Korath's outer perimeter, but they're gathering in force near the main supply docks. If we hit them there, we can disrupt their logistics and prevent reinforcements from reaching them." Maya spoke up from the rear of the room, her eyes focused on the schematics. That's a stronghold. If we hit them there, we'll cripple their supply lines. But it's risky. We'd be exposing ourselves to a full-on counterattack. Lenora nodded. Risk is a part of the game. We can't afford to play it safe anymore. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we break their morale before they can regroup. Garrick, who had been silently monitoring the external systems, chimed in. I've got eyes on an enemy frigate in the outer ring. It's too well positioned to be a coincidence. They're trying to box us in. We'll need to take it out first. Lenora's mind raced as the pieces of the plan fell into place. All right, listen up. We'll make the frigate our first target. Alien, give me a trajectory that'll take us to the supply docks after we've neutralized the frigate. We'll hit them with everything we've got, shields, torpedoes, the works. Alien quickly pulled up the necessary data. I've got the route. We'll take out the frigate, then loop around to strike the supply docks from the blind side. The Oberon can provide backup when we're in position. Garrick, get the team ready, Lenora continued. We'll need to board the docks once we've disabled their defenses. Maya, prepare the medical bay. There's no telling how many casualties we'll have, but I want us ready. As the Arbiter slipped into position, Lenora felt a surge of determination. They were about to go head-to-head with the traitors. This battle, this strike, was their last chance to show the galaxy that the Silent Guardians still stood for something. The crew readied themselves, and Lenora watched as the stars stretched out before them. A new chapter in the war was about to begin, and it would be a fight to the bitter end. The Arbiter shook as it dropped out of the jump and into the cold expanse of Korit's outer system. The stars blinked back into focus, revealing the flickering lights of the traitor fleet in the distance. Lenora's heart pounded as she surveyed the scene through the ship's massive viewing window. The space was alive with tension, ships in motion, energy spikes from weapon systems charging, and faint glows from the supply station ahead. The enemy frigate, a sleek and deadly vessel, loomed near the perimeter. Its position was strategic, positioned just far enough to offer cover and reinforcements, but vulnerable if attacked directly. Lenora's focus sharpened. This was it, the first step in breaking the traitor's grip on the galaxy. Ready weapons, Lenora ordered, her voice cutting through the comms, steady despite the rising pressure. Alien, give me the tactical layout. We can't afford to miss anything. Alien's hands flew across the controls, his eyes scanning the multiple data streams on his console. We're in range of the frigate now. It's got a couple of heavy turrets on its flanks. We'll need to neutralize them first if we want a clean shot. Garrick spoke up from the weapons bay. I've got the launchers prepped. I'll fire off the EMPs first to disable their weapons, then follow up with full missile barrages. Do it, Lenora said, turning to Garrick as the ship's lights flickered briefly, signaling their readiness. Everyone stay sharp. Alien, lock in the trajectory for the next strike. Once we take the frigate down, we move straight for the docks. The Arbiter's weapons hummed to life, and Lenora felt a surge of anticipation rush through her. The crew had trained for this moment countless times, but this was real. The stakes were higher than ever. As the ship approached the frigate, Lenora could almost hear the heartbeat of the galaxy pounding with every passing second. A warning beep sounded in the cockpit. They've detected us, Alien reported, voice tight with urgency. Frigate's powering up its shields. Activate stealth mode now, Lenora barked. We need to close the distance before they can fire. The Arbiter's stealth systems engaged with a software, cloaking the ship in near invisibility as it slid closer to the frigate. For a moment, all that existed was the feeling of space pressing in on them, a quiet tension before the storm. Garrick's voice came over the comms, calm but focused. EMP launch in 3, 2, 1. The sudden burst of electromagnetic force lit up the space in a dazzling flash, aimed squarely at the frigate's shields. Lenora watched, heart in her throat, as the frigate's energy fields flickered and dimmed. the once impenetrable shield now struggling to recover from the disruption. The Arbiter's momentum carried them past the enemy ship, narrowly avoiding the defensive fire as Garrick launched the first wave of missiles. Direct hit. Shields are down, Garrick called out, excitement creeping into his voice. They're wide open, Captain. Lenora seized the moment. Full weapons now. The Arbiter unleashed everything: torpedoes, plasma blasts, and railgun fire. The frigate rocked under the barrage, its hull starting to buckle as each shot struck true. Lenora felt the brief shudder of the ship as their missiles tore into the enemy vessel. Within moments, the frigate erupted into a fiery explosion, fragments of its structure scattering through space. Frigate's gone, Garrick confirmed, a rare smile crossing his face. One less threat. Good work, Lenora replied, though her focus remained sharp. Alien, plot the course to the docks. We don't have much time before reinforcements arrive. The Arbiter quickly adjusted its course, cutting through the vacuum with incredible speed. Ahead, the supply docks loomed like a fortress, massive and imposing, surrounded by smaller, heavily armed defense ships. They'd made their mark with the frigate's destruction, but the hardest part was yet to come. Shields are holding steady, Maya reported from the medical bay. Everyone's prepped for casualties, but we'll need to move fast. Lenora's eyes hardened. We'll take them down before they know we're here. We strike fast, hit the supply depot, and cripple their ability to resupply. The next few moments passed in a blur of action, rapid calculations, weapon system adjustments, and tactical strikes. The docks, once a symbol of the trader's might, were about to become their undoing. As the Arbiter neared the supply station, Lenora felt the weight of their next move pressing down on her. The galaxy's future depended on their success. This was no longer just a mission, it was a turning point. Steady, everyone, she murmured to herself, gripping the armrest of her seat. We're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting to reclaim the galaxy. The battle for Korath had just begun, and Lenora knew there would be no going back. The Silent Guardians had entered the heart of the storm. The Arbiter cut through the vastness of space with the precision of a predator on the hunt. Lenora stood at the helm, her mind focused on the task ahead. They were close now, close to the docks that would decide the outcome of this phase of the war. The enemy ships swarmed around the station like vultures, their movements erratic and defensive, aware that their supply lines were at risk. Captain, we're within range of the first defense perimeter, Alien reported, his voice steady but laced with tension. They've deployed 2 destroyers to cover the station's blind spots. We'll need to disable them first if we're going to make it through. Lenora's eyes narrowed. The destroyers were formidable, heavily armed, and well shielded, their large weapons capable of tearing through the Arbiter's defenses in seconds. But the Arbiter wasn't a typical warship. It was a silent killer, built for precision strikes and stealth, and it was time to put that to the test. Garrick, prepare the ion disruptors. We'll take out their engines first, then neutralize their weapon systems, Lenora ordered. Ready, Captain, Garrick's voice echoed over the comms. Alien, give me the coordinates, Lenora pressed, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. The enemy ships were spread across the space around the docks, but the destroyers were the immediate threat. We'll strike fast and hard. Get me a firing solution. The Arbiter aligned itself with one of the destroyers, its sleek, dark hull nearly invisible in the cold, empty void. The shields flared briefly as it reoriented for the attack, every system coming online for the imminent strike. Lenora's hands hovered over the controls as she synchronized the ship's weapon systems. The silence on the bridge was deafening as they approached their target. Now, Lenora commanded. A volley of ion disruptor blasts shot out from the Arbiter, slamming into the destroyer's aft section. The ship shuddered as its engines sputtered, flickered, and died. For a brief moment, it was still vulnerable. Garrick's voice came through almost immediately. I've got the missile lock, Captain. targeting their weapon systems now. Lenora's fingers twitched on the control panel. Fire. The Arbiter released a barrage of precision missiles, each one aimed at critical systems, reactor cores, weapon batteries, and shield generators. The destroyer bucked and groaned as the missiles struck their marks. Within seconds, the enemy ship was dead in the water, its power systems failing, its once vibrant weapons now a flickering memory. One down, Garrick said, his tone calm but with a hint of satisfaction. Lenora exhaled, a brief moment of relief before the reality of the situation hit her again. The docks were still swarming with enemy ships, and they weren't out of danger yet. Elian, plot a course to the second destroyer. We need to hit it before they regroup, she ordered. As Elian worked the controls, Lenora's mind raced. She knew they couldn't afford to let the enemy regroup. This was their window, and they had to push through. We'll be in range in 20 seconds, Elian announced. Lenora nodded. Garrick, prepare the second strike. Same targets, engines first, then weapon systems. The ship accelerated, darting toward the second destroyer, which was already powering up its weapons, desperate to retaliate. But the Arbiter was faster, more agile. The destroyer's turrets locked onto the Arbiter for a moment, but they fired too late. The Arbiter's shields flared as the first barrage of enemy fire struck, but the ship held steady, absorbing the impact with minimal damage. Disruptors ready, Garrick reported. Now, Lenora barked. Another volley of ion disruptors hit the second destroyer's engines, and once again the massive vessel faltered. Without its engines, the destroyer was a sitting target. Garrick launched another missile barrage, this time aimed at the enemy's weapon systems. The ship's outer hull exploded in a burst of flame and shrapnel, its turrets silenced forever. That's two, Garrick said, the satisfaction in his voice clear. We've crippled their defenses. Lenora didn't celebrate. There was no time for celebration. They still had a mission to complete. We're not done yet, she reminded the crew. Prepare for the next phase. We've breached the outer defenses, but now we have to take down the supply station. Captain, Elian interjected, his voice urgent. There's movement near the station's hangars. I'm reading at least 3 capital ships inbound. It looks like reinforcements are on the way. Lenora's heart skipped a beat. I thought we didn't have time for reinforcements. We don't, Elian said grimly, but they're coming anyway. The situation was deteriorating faster than Lenora had anticipated. Reinforcements would tip the scales against them. If they didn't move quickly, the docks and the entire fleet would be lost. Hold tight, Lenora said. We're going to take the fight to the heart of the storm. The crew braced themselves for the final assault, knowing full well the stakes. Lenora's eyes locked on the glowing form of the supply station ahead, ready to push forward into the very jaws of the battle. This wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about survival, and they would fight until the end. The Arbiter plunged deeper into the heart of the battle, its hull shuddering under the incoming fire from the capital ships. Lenora's mind raced as she quickly weighed their options. The reinforcements had arrived, and the situation had turned desperate. The docks loomed large ahead, a towering structure full of hostile ships, weapons, and supplies, the key to the traitors' power in this region. But now it was more than that. It was a death trap, and they were running out of time. Elian, how much longer until we reach the docks? Lenora asked, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding. We're less than 5 minutes out, Elian responded, his hands flying over the controls, his eyes darting across multiple tactical screens. But the capital ships are closing in. We need to neutralize them before we can safely dock. Lenora's gaze hardened as she watched the massive ships in the distance, their enormous weapons charging with deadly intent. The Arbiter couldn't take another direct hit. They needed to act, and fast. Garrick, prepare all systems for a full offensive. We're going to hit them hard and fast. Take out their main guns first, disable them completely. Maya, Be ready to assist with any medical needs, but I need you to stay focused. If anything happens to the crew, you're our last line of defense." "Understood, Captain," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. She was always calm in the face of danger, her hands already poised above the medbay controls, preparing for the inevitable injuries. Lenora's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The two capital ships were formidable, their sheer size and firepower overwhelming, but they weren't invincible. There was a chance, just a small one, that they could take them down before the reinforcements could establish a foothold. "Elian, initiate evasive maneuvers," Lenora ordered, her grip tightening on the controls. "Garrick, once we're in range, fire everything we've got." The Arbiter lurched into action, darting through the debris and smaller enemy ships as it weaved toward the capital ships. The enemy fire came in bursts, plasma cannons, ion disruptors, and laser beams that sliced through the void. Lenora's instincts kicked in, steering the ship to dodge and weave as each shot narrowly missed its mark. The first capital ship loomed large on their starboard side. Lenora's heart raced. They had to disable its weapon systems now. "Garrick, target their weapon arrays," Lenora commanded. "Elian, get us closer. We need that lock." The ship responded to Elian's precise input, aligning their trajectory. Garrick's voice cut in just as the ship stabilized, his words laced with determination. "Weapons locked. Firing." The Arbiter unleashed everything it had: ion disruptors, heavy plasma, and missile barrages, all in a single explosive release. The capital ship shook violently as the projectiles slammed into its hull, striking the main weapons arrays. For a moment, Lenora thought they had missed, but then the ship's energy systems flared and sputtered. The weapon turrets, once primed and ready to fire, went dark. The first capital ship was neutralized. "One down," Garrick said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice, though the job was far from finished, moving on to the second. But Lenora knew they couldn't afford to waste time. The second capital ship was still charging its weapons, and they had to strike before it could retaliate. "Elian, move us on the other side of the station. Get us close enough to hit them from a blind spot," she instructed. "We can't risk a head-on attack." As the Arbiter deftly maneuvered into position, Lenora's heart pounded in her chest. The second ship was larger, its weapons more powerful, but it was also slower, more cumbersome. That was their advantage. "Targeting their primary shields," Garrick reported. "Missiles locked on." "Fire," Lenora commanded, her voice a calm directive amidst the chaos. A second wave of missiles, ion disruptors, and heavy plasma blasts ripped through space. This time, the Arbiter hit with pinpoint accuracy. The capital ship's shields flared, but they buckled under the weight of the assault. Within moments, the ship's weapon systems went dark, and its engines faltered. The second capital ship was down. "We've done it," Elian exhaled. "They won't be able to regroup in time. We've cleared the path." Lenora's grip tightened as the space around the docks cleared, the immediate danger vanishing in the wake of the battle. But the real challenge remained. The supply station was still active, and there were still enemies lurking within. "Prepare for boarding," Lenora said, her voice low and commanding. "We're going in. No more waiting." The Arbiter made its final approach, its hull dark against the backdrop of the massive station. Lenora's hands hovered over the controls, her mind focused on the task ahead. They would breach the station's core and take down its central command. This was their final push. If they succeeded, the traitor fleet would crumble. If they failed, the galaxy would fall into chaos. "Prepare for the assault," Lenora said, her eyes flashing with fierce determination. "We finish this now." With a single command, the Arbiter launched forward, straight into the heart of the enemy stronghold. The Silent Guardians would claim victory or perish in the attempt, but one thing was certain: they would not go quietly into the night.